So tonight's key focus areas and the purpose of the session, again, we'll be looking to go through some of these, the key dates, the season dates, the review that was undertaken at the end of last season, and off the back of that review, the 2026 operational changes that will kick in for this season, and some of the rule changes as well, which we will be going through tonight. So the first thing we'll get straight into is the key dates, which have been circulated out to clubs already. So um, the the big one here is looking at team entries. So team entries are looking to open next Tuesday, the 10th of February. Entries will be open for 5 weeks, closing on the 17th of March. And then when we will do our pre-grading is the 23rd to the 27th of March, and then looking to catch up with our women's and men's grading panels for that. Those other key dates are in there for the draw releases. We have kept in there the submit request to change the draw as things change throughout the season. So we will then be looking to kick off badge for the Thursday ladies Thursday the 30th of April, and Saturday badge will commence Saturday the 2nd of May. Just a couple of things on that. The first thing I will acknowledge is that there is an appetite to start the season earlier. We do acknowledge that and we do hear that. One thing that was a big one and sort of out of our control this year was that 2026 is an anomaly year where April is completely out of play this season. So we have Easter, we have 2 weeks of April school holidays, and then we have the Anzac Day weekend where it was 4 straight weeks where we were out of play. So yeah, it was a little bit unfortunate this season, and we do understand there is an appetite to start earlier in the season for badge, and we're looking at that for next year for 2027. These have also been circulated around, but these are the season dates for both Thursday ladies and the Saturday badge. Again, looking Thursday ladies starting on the 30th of April and Saturday badge starting on the 2nd of May. So a little bit of a later start than what we probably would have all preferred, but that's where we've landed for this year. A big thank you to those who have expressed their interest in being part of the panels, both the badge panel and the grading panel for 2026 and the 2027 term. Those who have been on the panels over the past couple of years and have had to deal with me know that it is a mountain of work, and it really sets up the season in terms of grading. The badge panel giving us feedback, and the work that's done throughout the season is absolutely incredible. So personally, a big thank you to those who have put their hands up. Those panels have been confirmed. The big one for us this year is that we will not be releasing the names of the grading panels. The responsibility of the grading panel is quite significant, and we do feel that it's important for us to protect that process. So panel members are, of course, feel free to share their involvement if they choose, but Tennis New South Wales won't be sharing or formally circulating those names around. But again, they are locked in, and a big thank you to those who have put their hand up, and I will be seeing you all in a couple of weeks' time. So getting straight into, I guess, the review that was undertaken at the end of last season. So in preparation for this season, Tennis New South Wales undertook a structured review informed by feedback from across the Sydney badge community. This involved a lot of consultation with clubs, delegates, and even players over the past 2 years. Some of the people on this call, even, I'm guessing, would have heard a lot from me from week-to-week basis. I know I've been in the role now 2 years, and there's been a lot of phone calls, a lot of feedback, a lot of your voices heard. So, a lot of phone conversations, a lot of emails weekly. We then obviously have our mid-season and post-season reviews with the badge panel. We give input and proposed changes from the Metro Sydney Committee. Part of this review was also Tennis New South Wales internally, and then we did go out with a badge community survey at the end of last year as well. So yeah, a lot of different input, a lot of voices, a lot of feedback, and we heard it all. There was not one individual piece of feedback or notes or proposed changes that went into this. It was really a collective review that went into this, and everyone was heard. So everyone that had put in input into this, we really appreciate that. One additional part of the badge community of the review we did, as I mentioned, was the community survey. So I thought it would be good to take a little bit of time to go through some of those survey results. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the 2026 changes are the outcome of a structured and considered review. I did think it would be worthwhile sharing some of the results here with you. Though the survey was intentionally short, we didn't want to overwhelm people with questions. Instead, we really wanted to use it to gather feedback on some key areas. And I thought it'd be good to show some of the results from this. So if we have a look, some of the key areas we wanted to get feedback on was around the reserves itself, how useful the reserve pool was, and how often clubs used it, and then the structure of finals. So interesting to look here on the left, we've got how useful was it for clubs to view a list of reserve players that they can contact. We had just shy of 40% say that it was somewhat useful, just over 30% said it was very useful, and then we had a broad range of responses that said that it was not particularly useful, not useful at all, and a surprising one that they were not aware of the reserve pool, which again is understandable that the reserve pool only went out to club delegates and team captains. How often did you use the reserve pool? Again, just shy of 35% said rarely. And in that middle section there was frequently and occasionally, just under 25% for both. And again, just shy of 20% were unknown of that question. The competition structure preference, it was interesting. We wanted to gather some feedback on people's responses on their preferred division sizes, but also the length of the season came into play there as well. Interesting that, yeah, over 50% of our responses we got was to prioritize 8 teams per division. And then there was no strong preference was the second highest there at just over 30%. We hear this one, top right-hand corner, we're looking at the importance for teams to be scheduled to play equal amount of times. Nearly 90% of responses said that it is absolutely vital and extremely important. We do hear that, and I will be touching on something a little later on some of the changes we've made to try to implement that where we can. The bottom left, we spoke, these two bottom graphs you're looking at here are the responses regarding the finals. So as you would know, in previous years, we had a spare week put away for finals for wet weather. That was either for semi-finals or grand finals. And interesting to see that the majority of people, 62.1% of people, said that they would prefer to prioritize the grand final over that. And I'll spoiler alert, that is a change that we have made in the rules. So for finals, we will be prioritizing the grand final in that, and I'll explain that a little bit. And then the last question we asked was around the final structure. So the top 4 teams going through from a division, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3. How satisfied were you? And just shy of 80% said that they were satisfied, and the 20% of people said that they were neutral. We didn't have anyone that was against that structure, which was pretty cool to see. So again, one thing I do want to highlight is that that was only one part of the review was the community survey. So these results are not a direct outcome of the changes that have been made. But it was good to see and get feedback from the wider badge community who maybe didn't feel that they had a voice throughout the year like the delegates or the panels do. So that was nice to see. Moving on to the 2026 confirmed changes for the season. So part of the review that was taken, again, really proved out to be the outcomes of this. On this slide, you can see that there are 3 changes that are very closely linked here. So the first one being the removal of the appeals process from the preseason and key dates, changes to the team composition, and an update on how grading will be determined. So when we go through these changes, I want to explain what's changing, the rationale behind them, and also what it means for clubs heading into 2026. So the expectations that we can have. So firstly, the appeals process will no longer apply for the 2026 season. Grading will be final after the men's and women's grading panel meetings. The rationale behind these changes. So looking at the preseason processes before the season kicks off, there was about 3 months between team entries opening and round 1 of the season. And looking at that, the appeals took up quite a big chunk of that. But obviously, there is one linking in with the appetite to start the season earlier. 3 months between team entries opening and the start of the season is quite a lengthy period for our competition. So what we found when we look through part of the review, but we look through some of the statistics over the last couple of years, is in many cases teams were not submitting complete or accurate information up front, whether that was entering only a small number of base players, holding back until after grading, or relying on the appeals process to correct their issues later. What we also saw is that a big percentage of appeals over the past few seasons were based on teams not having certain players in their teams at the time of grading, or the right information or evidence to support their team's grade in front of the grading panel, not there at the time of grading. So the appeals process, I guess, from our point of view, was unintentionally encouraging certain behaviors at the time of team entry. So I guess that's a little bit of the rationale behind the decision there. One of the things we looked at closely was also the team composition. Based on our records, we are not aware of any team, at least in my time, but we've looked through a little bit further as well, that has finished off a bad season with only 4 base players. Again, we do want to encourage teams to enter base players and not rely on reserve players, although acknowledging reserve players play a massive role in our competition, but purely talking from a team entry and a grading perspective. However, we did consistently see teams entering only 4 base players at the time of grading, often the highest rated players with the intention of being graded higher and then adding additional players or reserves later in the season. So that approach made it difficult for the grading panels themselves to accurately grade or assess the true strength of a team. And again, the percentages of appeals over the past couple of years were really based on the grading panel not having the right facts in front of them. The intent of the team composition and grading changes by increasing the minimum number of base players to 6 and grading teams based on the top 6 base players by UTR. We're creating a constant and fair grading framework across all teams and all divisions. So what we are encouraging is for clubs to enter their base players into teams up front and also provide the correct evidence or supporting evidence that you may have on your team, specifically around players who don't have a UTR rating. We do, those 3 letters are used quite a lot in our sport and in competitions that we use, UTR. It is only one aspect of grading, but again, it does give us a good sense of where the team and the players are at. What does this mean? So what does this mean for 2026 and what does this mean for clubs? So I want to really put a pause here and put an emphasis on this next slide. Some of the expectations we have is that why timing is so important. So for those delegates, captains, or club representatives that are on the call at the moment who enter their teams through Match Center, you will know that the process is I wouldn't say it's straightforward. You enter and pay your team entry, and then an invitation link gets sent out to your players. So there is a part of a responsibility where your players need to accept the link to actually get into the team in the system. So in previous years, what's happened is, and honestly, I'm not sure why, it is something in our sport, even in tournament play, clubs, individual players like to enter at the last minute. It's just a thing that we have. One thing I will be encouraging is please try to get your teams early. However, what's happened in previous years is that team entries have often closed, and then sometimes within 24 hours, we're pulling our grading reports. So if a team has been entered on the last day or 2 of team entries opening, in theory, teams have only had 24 hours or players have only had 24 hours to accept their invitation, get into the team before the grading reports are pulled. So that's one thing that we have noticed from our side of things. And we have, looking at that third point there, we have extended, there's going to be 5 days between the entries closing and to when we do our pre-grading report. So again, there's 5 weeks for teams to enter teams, another 5 days after entries close for those players to get into teams. So just from a personal point of view, from us, we really want to encourage clubs and teams to get your teams in nice and early. We are obviously here to help. If there are players who are unable to get into the teams, click the link. They may be overseas. They may obviously have some troubles with their competitive player profile. Let us know, and we are here to help. But let's get onto that a little bit earlier. So there are no reasons to not have the right information for grading. Again, one thing we do want to make clear is that there is a rule, but again, we really, really want to highlight this and emphasize that clubs do have the ability to submit any additional supporting evidence, whether it be there are specific clubs who already do it, and it's amazing. But all the information that the grading panel and us, Tennis New South Wales, can have in front of us to grade the teams accurately is amazing. Obviously, players' UTRs, we look through previous results, any sanctioned events. But again, if you have, for example, specifically around players who don't have a UTR rating, it does help the grading panel a lot if you can provide some information sent into either the Sydney Badge website, and we put it in front of email address, and we put it in front of the grading panel. So whether that be results, whether that be information from yourself of the players at the club, any supporting evidence, I do really encourage teams to do that. So that was a big one from us. That all sort of links in with the appeals process not being here this year, team entry, knowing when entries are open, how long for, and getting your players and teams into the system, and also submitting any supporting evidence you can. The grading panel, again, want to give them a shout out. They do an absolutely sensational job. And with the appeals process not being here, the importance is even higher that we try to get that as accurate as possible. But I will be highlighting that there should be no excuses for players not to be in teams, or they're not the grading panel and us not to have the supporting evidence in front of us to grade teams accurately. Something that's new for 2026, and I won't spend too long on this, but is a venue capacity form. So this will be introduced this year, and we will be circulating that to all clubs once entries have closed. Simply, the purpose for this form is to capture everything that we do capture from clubs, but it just reduces the manual admin for this. This one form is going to capture court availability at your venue, how many teams you have, if you have any updates to club contact information, and again, how many courts you may have, how many teams you have at home, who can play at home, who can't at similar times, etc. So that sort of replaces the emails that come through from clubs, which obviously will then help us to create the badge draw, and for scheduling purposes, try to get scheduling as clear as possible. So just keep an eye out for that form. Again, I think that will just help everyone instead of sort of those emails coming through to us. My favorite thing over the last 2 years, reserve players. So if I'll now move on to reserve players, which is my favorite thing. The overarching objective with the reserve player changes this year has really been to simplify the process. I know I've spoken to a lot of people in the community around the reserve process since I've come on board. There were some changes that were implemented before I came in, which whether they were clear or not, again, I think created a little bit of confusion. So the whole purpose of this was to really simplify and make it transparent and consistent across the whole competition. So as most of you should know, in previous years, all reserve players were required to complete a compulsory form for the player to be eligible. We also had 2 different categories for reserves, which were open and closed reserves. Tennis New South Wales was also manually allocating badge UTRs, which in reality is not an official thing. It's not a recognized thing. We do have a UTR system for that reason. So I guess the intent behind the changes was to remove that complexity, full stop. And I really hope, well, I don't hope, I am confident that the changes we've made is going to do that. So where we've landed are as follows. So firstly, we have removed the distinction between open and closed reserves. Reserve players will just be one category as reserve players. We have also removed the allocation of badge UTRs. So Tennis New South Wales will no longer be allocating manual badge UTRs for players. We will be using a player's actual official UTR rating, whether it's provisional or verified. And I will touch on the process we're going to follow for players who do not have a UTR rating. But I think that was a big one, just to create a little bit of transparency for clubs. The reserve pool will be retained, but it is optional. So Tennis New South Wales will continue to provide delegates and team captains with access to a reserve pool document. I do acknowledge that some clubs in Sydney have in their either constitution or bylaws that they cannot use a reserve player who's not a member of the club. So completely understand that. But overall, we did find that clubs not enjoyed, it's probably not the right word, but appreciated having a document of players to be able to contact who have expressed their interest in Sydney to play. So each player list, each player on the reserve pool will have a link to their match centre profile, allowing the captains or the delegates to view that player's UTR profile, which will be up to date week to week. So this makes it really quick and easy to check eligibility before selecting a reserve specifically in the reserve pool. Players without a UTR rating. Before I touch on this, I do want to make mention that this is, I spent a lot of time meeting with all of the other MAs, member associations, so Tennis Victoria, Tennis Queensland, Tennis Vic, WA. This point right here, players without a UTR rating, is the big one that we all not struggle with, but we need to try to find a clear process for this. And I will say that Badge is quite unique. We are the only competition run by an MA that is only doubles and doesn't have a structured 1, 2, 3, 4 player list. So it makes it a little bit difficult for us. And every state does it differently. But I think we've landed with a really clear process for that. So if a reserve player does not hold an active UTR rating at the time of selection, the club or team must seek written approval from Tennis New South Wales before the player participates. This approval should be requested via email and include the player's details, if possible, any relevant information or supporting evidence to assist us in assessing eligibility. We may approve the player for the specific division, and we do retain the right to reassess eligibility if required. So just on that, from a personal note, I think the work that we've done over the last 2 years in getting majority of the percentage of the Badge community with competitive player profiles, linking their UTR ratings. I think we're going to be talking about a real small percentage of people here, but I think we do have a real clear process here. And again, we will work through this as best we can. But again, I think the best way we do that is if we get written approval, we'll work with the club, we'll work with the player if we have to. And then the good thing with that, a player will get a UTR rating, whether it's provisional or not, after they play a match or two. So again, talking about a very small percentage of players here, but we don't want to shut the door on players that don't have an active UTR rating. We want to get as many players playing tennis as we can. So just a summary of reserve players for this season. And I do encourage people to put in their questions if they do have questions in the chat, and I will get to that at the end. But if you do have any questions specifically on these two that I've mentioned regarding the grading process, appeals and reserves, because these are the main big changes that we have made. But in simple terms, for 2026, any player can act as a reserve as long as their UTR rating is below the upper limit for that division set by the grading panel. These limits will apply only to reserve players, and they do not apply for base players. Division 1 will continue to not have a UTR upper limit. So for those in Division 1 looking for a reserve, in theory, you can get any player, and that will stay the same at the moment. So the responsibility for clubs and captains, it does remain the responsibility of clubs and team captains to ensure that their reserve players have a valid competitive player profile and are eligible to play for that division, and that they can correctly be entered into the Match Centre scorecard. So the big one at the bottom of this slide here, we are always here to assist. If you have any questions on eligibility, if you're not sure, if you're unsure, even if they have a player profile, can be entered, how to enter the player, please let us know. But it is the responsibility of the club. So if we don't hear from you, you may be up for rubbers being forfeited throughout the season. But again, we really just want to try to make that as transparent as possible. And I'm confident we have done that for this season. A new process that we've brought in for this year, which is almost a process and a rule as well, is how we deal with unspecified players. So in previous years, what's happened is the rules have stated that if a team has entered an unspecified player in the scorecard, that would be an automatic result in a forfeit. One thing I can personally say is that, as someone that confirms the scores, goes through and views the scores on Tuesdays, um, I'd say almost 80 to 90% of the unspecified players that are entered are not actually breaking eligibility rules. It simply may be that the team that week didn't know how to enter them. The player may not have had a competitive player profile. And I think it's important to say that, we're not trying to forfeit rubbers or penalize teams for getting any last minute reserves, or if they're unsure of simply how to enter a player through that process. So we have changed this up a little bit. So what we've done is we have implemented a new process where an unspecified player is identified by us in a scorecard. We will notify the relevant team and team captain in writing. This will occur as part of our weekly review of the matches on a Tuesday. From that point on, the team will have until 12 p.m. on Friday following the match to ensure the player is registered with a valid Tennis Australia competitive player profile, and that they are correctly entered into the Match Centre scorecard. We will then complete our due diligence to confirm whether the player was eligible to participate in that division. So, yeah, I guess the big one from us here is if you do need to get a last minute reserve, or even if you're unsure if they have a profile, how to put them in, don't stress too much. The rubbers are not going to be forfeited straight away. We can help you that next week as part of the new process. But obviously, eligibility still does apply here. So forfeits will still apply if we find that the player had a UTR that was above the limit of that division. And if the player didn't have an active UTR rating and we didn't seek written approval, we didn't receive written approval from the club to play in that division. So to be clear, this is not removing eligibility requirements. It's providing a fair and workable process, in our opinion, for this. So I am confident that, again, the work we've done over the last couple of years, and again, a big shout out to all of the delegates who have been passing this message on to their players, to link all of their profiles, their competitive player profile. Let's hope we don't have too many of these, but we do have a clear process for this, and teams won't be penalised straight away. Our final reinforcement, again, we are here to assist, as I said. So this is a process change. So again, if you are confused, if there's anything we can help with, please reach out, and we're obviously here to help. I will just take a minute to pause there because, as I mentioned at the start, I do tend to talk quite fast. Overall, that is majority of the changes that we've made operationally. So again, the big ones there for the key dates and the preseason dates were the appeals and grading, how that links in, and then the reserve players and unspecified players. Again, encourage people to put in the chat, or happy to even send me an email with any questions they do have on that. And yeah, I'm hoping that we can be a little bit more consistent and transparent with these new changes. So moving on to the 2026 rule changes. So the first one, which has been circulated out in a document, is a player substitution rule. So this is a new framework for 2026, and this does replace what was previously referred to as the player injury rule. So this is not necessarily a change. This is an addition. So really important that I spend a little bit of time on this to make sure that we're across this. So under the previous rule, if a player was injured and forced to retire from a rubber, captains were effectively required to agree on whether players were fit enough to continue. So, for example, the previous rule was if you retire from your first rubber, you cannot come and play your second rubber unless both team captains agree. What we found with that was home clubs obviously have their own internal processes in regards to player injury on court. preventing further injury, we do have a duty of care for that. So putting that the captains in positions to agree was probably not the best idea from us. So I'm hoping that this can provide a little bit more clarity around that. So if a player does retire from a rubber, whether it is due to injury, time constraints, illness, or for whatever other reason, they cannot return to play in the next rubber for that match. That will stay the same. If a player does not complete their first rubber, any unplayed sets that are forfeited, and that remains consistent with previous seasons. So what has changed? We have introduced a substitution rule. So at the conclusion of the first rubber by both pairs, and just to be clear, the conclusion of a first rubber can be either you have completed the first 2 sets, completely fine, or you have retired either due to injury, time constraints, whatever it may be. That is the completion of the first rubber. A team may substitute one player, only one player from another another player from that team. A substitute player cannot come in and continue the score from the first rubber. So if I retire at 3 games all, I cannot be substituted and that match continue. I'll need to forfeit that rubber and someone else come in. Just on the timing, the declaration of timing on this, teams are not required to declare a substitute at the commencement of the match. A team could arrive with 4 players, 5 players, or even 6 players if they really wanted to. There's no requirement to notify the opposition of this in advance. However, once the last rubber has finished, the first of the rubbers, I should say, sorry, the substitution must be declared within 3 minutes. So I hope that makes sense, and I will go into a little bit of the rationale behind the rule. So the rationale behind that is that we recognize that many players have work, family, or even social commitments that make the 11:30 a.m. Or 12 p.m. start times, or even the later finishes difficult. We also acknowledge that some players struggle to play 4 continuous sets, including players possibly returning from injury, or some of our elderly players. So that's some of the rationale behind the rule that's been introduced. And I think it's important to note that this is a trial for this season. So again, acknowledging this is a new rule, so please let us know if you have any questions on this one, but it will be something that we're going to trial for this season. And the same thing applies for the finals as well. So a replacement player can be used in the semi-finals or finals matches, as long as that player is eligible for finals, which means they would have had to have played 3 matches during the regular season and been a base player. I hope I'm not moving too quick, but we are up to our final section. So the next area I do want to touch on is finals, which sits under Rule 19. So there are only 2 main changes here, which we've put under the finals section. The first addition we've made is a clarification statement at the start of the final section. It now explicitly states that for the avoidance of doubt, all regular season rules apply to finals matches unless they are otherwise stated within the rules. I think from a personal point of view, there has been acknowledging as well that there has been different I've had a mind blank here, but reading the rules differently, and they contradict themselves in the past few years. So some of the changes that we've made is to really clear that up and make sure that the rules don't contradict themselves, and there's a clear understanding of that. So it also clarifies under the finals rules that these apply in addition to and not instead of all regular season rules, unless they are specifically stated. So we have put that under the final section in the rules. The change that we've made is to, as mentioned before, as part of some of the review and the stakeholder survey response, was the prioritizing the grand final for wet weather. We saw the survey results and the broader feedback. There was a strong preference for this to happen, to prioritize the grand final. So based on that feedback, 1 wet weather week has now been reserved specifically for the grand final. If the semi-finals are washed out and cannot be played, they will not be rescheduled. In that case, the teams finishing first and second on the ladder will progress directly to the grand final in week 2. If the grand final is then washed out in week 2, it will be rescheduled to week 3. So I won't touch too much further on that because we are a long way from finals, and we will obviously recommunicate that out once we reach there. But just thought we'd touch on that one. A really important one for myself that I do want to touch on, and admittedly, mainly the main part, the main reason we put in that statement on that below slide there under the finals was to really distinguish the difference between the regular season and the finals. It seemed that there was a little bit of confusion around the expectation during either wet weather or playing at certain venues and times between regular season and finals. So I guess touching just on the match schedule itself, during the regular season, matches are governed by rules 10.1 and 10.3, which will be sent out after this session. In simple terms, regular season matches are played within a fixed time period of 2 hours and 45 minutes. Rule 10.2 states that a match is completed at the end of that session time, regardless whether the rubbers have been completed. An important one that I do want to highlight, and I think clubs and captains are aware of this, but I'm not sure it happens too often, is that those matches in the regular season can continue to play as long as there's an agreement before the match starts. So only if both team captains agree prior to the commencement of the round, and only if there are courts and lights available. So obviously our expectation is for team captains or teams on the day to have a chat about that. If you do reach that time period, there needs to be an agreement before the match starts. So yeah, the key point from the regular season is that matches are timed. Unless both team captains agree, matches cannot continue beyond the allocated time. For finals are different. Finals are different, and we have had some disputes come through in the last couple of seasons, and I hope that this clears things up a little bit. So under Rule 19, semi-final and grand final matches must be played out to ensure that there is a winner. So finals matches are not limited in the same way that regular season matches are. So that's in simple terms, that's all it is. We really need to make sure that there's a result for all of our finals matches. And if there's not, it will most likely be on the home team, questioning why that was. If courts weren't booked for a certain amount of time, we will obviously need to look into that. The big one I do want to touch on is the inclement weather. So our expectations for the regular season versus the finals. So during the regular season, the rules encourage but do not compel teams to explore options to minimize washouts. Washouts are a part of life. The rain, unfortunately, was better for us last year. Wasn't so good for us 2 years ago, but it is a part of the sport. I wish we had more indoor courts in Sydney, but we do obviously need to have rules around this. So captains are expected to communicate at a minimum 2 hours prior to match time to determine whether a match can proceed. Where it is possible, options may include playing the match at the home team's alternate venue or playing at the away team's venue, if both team captains agree. So what is our expectation with this? Our expectation during the regular season is that teams communicate, and I know that teams, clubs, captains, and delegates do this really, really well, and I condemn you for that. But to try to play communicate as early and try to play where possible. We're all here to play tennis at the end of the day, but do understand there are time constraints. If there's only an hour until the match, and the match possibly gets changed to 2 hours away. If an agreement cannot be reached, and a washout is agreed, there will be no penalties. We do understand that sometimes conditions simply don't allow play. Where I want to make an emphasis here is in the finals. A little bit of a change that we've had here is that under Rule 19.4, if the home team's venue is unavailable to play during inclement weather or court availability, the finals match must be played at an alternate venue, or if one is available. So the order of priority for our finals matches will be 1, the home team's venue. 2nd will be the home team's approved alternate venue if they have one, and then the away team's venue if the courts are available. So in that order, a finals match may only be declared a washout once these 3 options have been exhausted. So again, don't want to touch too much on that. I do want to make that clear. We're far away from the finals this season, but this rule is now in place of the regular season rules. So that is the distinguished difference between the regular season and the finals. And again, condemning the players, captains, and delegates for how they communicate throughout the week. But the finals, we really want to try to get on where possible. So to summarize, the regular season prioritizes scheduling and certain flexibility. Finals prioritizes determining a winner. Unless a rule is specifically overridden in the final section, all of the regular season rules will continue to apply. And that clarification is now clearly written into the rules, so there hopefully should be no confusion moving forward. That's really it in terms of the big rule changes, which is a good thing. There hasn't been too many rule changes, which is great. The outcomes of the review, again, really focused on simplifying. As I've mentioned, there has been a few additions there. One thing I will touch on just quickly here is that, and show, this document will be circulated out to all clubs after this information session, or most likely tomorrow. But this is a summary of the rule changes for 2026. So I have mentioned and gone through a lot of them, but I do strongly recommend clubs read through this. I'll sort of really squeeze through this quickly, but we have a change in the competition structure. So as part of the review and the responses we got from the feedback, there's an overwhelming need for teams to be scheduled to play each other an equal amount of times, which is completely understandable. So an addition we have into the rules is that we always try to generally land with a minimum of 6 and a maximum of 8 teams per division. But we will reserve the right now to alter the length of the season, including the number of rounds played in a division, to enable teams to play each other an equal amount of times. So where I'll give an example of that is we definitely won't just do that on the spot and it's a surprise to everyone. An example of that was last season we had our Division 1 ladies on Saturday who had 6 teams in there, and for a 14-week 14-round competition, a 6-team division does not play each other an equal amount of time. So the process we went through there was we offered all of the club delegates and team captains the option to play an additional round 15, which all teams played each other an equal amount of times. Again, the big one there is that they are scheduled to. Most likely we will have some weeks washed out or for whatever reason possible forfeits or whatever. Obviously, fingers crossed that doesn't happen. But that rule just gives us a little bit of flexibility there to possibly change that where need be. So it's fair and transparent with all clubs that they play each other an equal amount of times. Touching on the team composition, again, we've increased from 4 to 6 in the minimum base players. The reserve players, again, I'll pop through this chat and see if there's any questions, but really tried to simplify as much as we can the reserve players. The reserve pool is there if needed, but again, any player can reserve as long as they are eligible. Their UTR must be below the upper limit of that division, and if they don't have a UTR, please reach out to us, let us know, and we can work with you in terms of getting them eligible for that division. We have a new process for the unspecified players, which I've gone through. Grading and appeals, we touched on. Again, that is a big one, which I want to really make sure all teams are across. Entries are opening next Tuesday. So if there are any doubts in terms of certain players, I did speak to a club delegate today around that they may have some international players coming in. So again, possibly not having a competitive player profile and not having a UTR, please let us know. Or again, submit some really supporting, any additional supporting documents for us and the grading panel to view, so we can go through that and grade them as accurate as possible. Just on that, again, I know I've mentioned it, but an expectation from us is the responsibility is on clubs. If you do have players come and sign up for your club and want to play in your teams, the expectation is that, whether it's the delegates, the captains, try to get an indication of what their level is. Again, we will try to do our best if written approval is sought for a player without a UTR, but if we don't have too much information, it will make it difficult. But we will obviously follow that process as best we can. Again, touching on the player substitution rule, the addition to finals. And I have mentioned in there, which is really important, just on the bottom of that document, the distinction between regular season and finals if there are any washouts or inclement weather. But again, I know I talk fast. I know that's gone very quickly. But the good news about that is that that is, in theory, all of the changes or proposed changes and adjustments that we have made. I guess overall, from my point of view, an overarching thing that I've found in the last 2 years is that we've heard everyone. There's been a lot of feedback. I've had a lot of conversations with keen stakeholders. I absolutely love the passion that we have for Badge. And I'm hoping, well, I'm not hoping, I keep saying I'm hoping, I am confident that the changes that we've put in and some of the additional processes that we've put in will help to bring clarity, but also consistency within our competition. At the end of the day, I think we're all here to play tennis. We have an amazing product with Badge. Tennis is an individual sport, and the team aspect of this is really incredible. So I guess just the last thing from us, the expectation remains the same. Clubs to continue to communicate with each other, reach out if we are here. Reach out if need be. We are here. We're always here to assist. And yeah, we're all here to play in the spirit of not only Badge, but the sport of tennis. So I hope you can take a little bit out of tonight in regards to setting up what the season's going to look like. Again, the most important one, looking at team entries opening next week, getting your teams in and organized where possible. And yeah, obviously here to assist. So I will just have a quick look through and see if there's any questions in the chat, which we do have one here. So Christine's asked, how will we monitor that a team substituting a player actually does it in 3 minutes? This could be controversial. Completely agreed, Christine. This could be controversial. The final Badge rules are not yet finalized, but I'd say 99% of them are. And that document I'm sending out will be circulated straight after this. But overall, the expectation is that as soon as the rubber is finished, the onus would be on the team captain or whoever the allocated captain of that day is to revoke that substitution as soon as possible, as soon as that rubber is in. It is a good point you raise, and something I will bring up is how do we actually monitor that. But again, one thing that we will be doing is making sure that within that 5-minute warm-up period, there's not an additional 5 minutes after that 3 minutes. As soon as the rubber's finished, our expectation would be honestly that a team should know if they're being substituted or not after the rubber. But again, we do obviously need to have a formal process around that. So there's a good point you raised there, Christine. What rules will be in place as to break between rubbers? That's a good question, Christine. I don't know if we have a formal response for you at the moment with that. I do know that, again, the rules just say that there is a 5-minute warm-up permitted between rubbers. Again, I'd like to get out on the grounds myself a little bit more, but from what I've seen, normally the players take that 5 minutes in between rubbers to sort of have that break. I don't think they need a warm-up in between that. But again, something we will take on board and potentially add in if we need to have something in there in regards to break between rubbers. So yeah, I will get back to you guys on that one. That is the only questions we have in the chat. I will stick around for another couple of minutes. Again, acknowledging I've probably gone through this quite quickly. But yeah, please fire away if you do have any questions and want to fire them through. Happy to take them on board and answer if I can. No problem, Alana. Thank you. And again, I know I have mentioned it. I will mention it again. But if anything is confusing, or you need some, happy to provide any more rationale behind some of these changes, please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to assist. And we will get some communications out through an EDM from Tennis New South Wales to all clubs in Sydney, all members of Tennis New South Wales, in regards to entries opening next Tuesday. So yeah, looking forward to that one. And sorry, for those that are still on the call, I will just mention one thing as well. If you are a big club that it's entering multiple teams, one thing I probably should have mentioned a little bit earlier, but one thing we have noticed and have had some feedback on is, because team entries are individual, it is an individual transaction on your card, whether it's the team captains or the clubs. So I would recommend, if you are a club that's entering more than possibly 5 or 6 teams, to space those entries out. Surprisingly, or was a surprise to me, we have had clubs have their cards stopped by the bank with multiple transactions coming through in a short amount of time. So just a bit of a, I guess, heads up for that, which we saw in the last couple of seasons. If you are entering multiple teams, the recommendation would be maybe space that out over a couple of days. Is it possible to play out the last set of a match as super tiebreak due to no lights and limited time? It's something we could. I will write down, Kitty. I can't say it's one that we have looked at previously, but yes, definitely something we can look to implement. We also asked if Div 1 men's and ladies teams are not scheduled on the same weekend at home. 100%, Christine. And part of, so the venue, so sorry, I should probably read that out. A question we had from Christine was around the venue capability. Could we ask that Div 1 men's and ladies are not scheduled on the same weekend at home? That will be the purpose of the venue capacity form as well. You'll be able to let us know what your preference is, if there's teams that you don't want to be played at home at the same time, etc. So if that is the case, and for example, your club itself wants to prioritize Division 1, we can do that for sure. I will stick around it is 7. I will stick around for another minute or two. So please fire away. But obviously, if we do end and you have any further questions, please feel free to email them through. But again, a big thank you to all that have jumped on. We will be posting this on the Badge website for those who weren't able to. And I hope that those that have jumped on have some clarity around the expectations for the season and can feed that through to your clubs and your players. And as always, we are here to assist. So please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, looks like most. I see some people are typing, so I will stick around. Can't even stop sharing my screen now. Does player sub only apply for one per match in one team? That's correct. Yeah. So the player substitution each team will only be eligible to make one substitution for one player. So for example, if you make a substitution, and in the second rubber there is someone who goes down, or for whatever reason, you can't make 2 substitutions after the first rubber. You can only make 1. So Carla has sent through a question. When substituting a player after the second set and both sets are completed, is the last set counted or forfeited? No, so those sets will still count. That's a great question. So everything will count. Everything up until when the player stops. So for example, if I'm playing in the first row, I play the first 2 sets, and our team makes a substitution for me to go out. Everything that I played will still count. It's just that I'm being substituted out to play in the second rubber. So everything, even for example, it's a great question. If I am to forfeit for whatever reason due to injury at 3-all or 4-all in the second set, the games that I won will still be counted. It'll just be the rest of those games. So if I retire at 4-all in the second set, the score will be 6-4 to the other team, and then the second rubber, the substitute player can come in and play subject to eligibility.